everybody, to Exercise is Medicine, episode number 14. My name is Mike Bruno. My co-host Nick Eltman is here. And today we have Niki Campbell. And Niki Campbell is somebody who I've had the pleasure of meeting through some of my workings at the Mid-Atlantic Regional Chapter of the ACSM. She was one of our invited speakers at the conference in November that was sort of sunsetted in Harrisburg before we get ready to go to Lancaster next year. So just a little bit of background on Niki. Niki is the founder and of the Flourish Group. You can find her information at theflourishgroup.net. Niki, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Yes. I think what would really be helpful if we can just get started is tell everybody a little bit about yourself and maybe how you came up with this idea from of the Flourish Group, right? You're out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, if I'm not mistaken, right? Did a little bit of research on you before we connected. So if you could just tell a bit about your journey and how you came up with this and how you've evolved in the profession, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. So I refrained from wearing my Steelers gear. I didn't want to get into some interstate rivalry if there's any Eagles fans. But yeah, so I'm from Pittsburgh. And this is my second career. So I spent 20 plus years in communications. I was a speechwriter. I did public relations, marketing, literally the nothing close to the only similarities were that I had worked in the food and beverage industry and had dabbled a little bit in some nutrition communication. My last big job was with McDonald's. And so that's always a interesting conversation starter. When you go from working at McDonald's, and I have, everybody has their opinions about that, to, going and getting a dietetics degree and further education in health and human performance. But the job I loved. What I didn't love was the travel and the stress and just the demands on my physical and mental health. And so I was having some trouble with my eyes. This is like the weirdest story, but my eye doctor kept trying to figure out what was going on. They were so dry, nothing was working. And he said to me, he's like, I think you have an autoimmune disease. He said, I think this is something other than an eye problem. He's like, I think it's an underlying condition. So I went to a rheumatologist, and sure enough, I have I have two autoimmune conditions. One is called Sjogren's syndrome, and it's annoying more than it is anything else. And then underlying and kind of secondary to that is rheumatoid arthritis. And so that was really scary to me because my grandmother had primary rheumatoid arthritis and was completely disabled. I mean, she was just, obviously decades ago, and maybe we didn't know what we know now, but it frightened me. And so my rheumatologist said to me, he's like, these conditions, this isn't going to be what takes you down, but your lifestyle might. And so, traveling across time zones, staying up late, having to get up early, not getting enough sleep, not eating at regular times. And the thing is, I wasn't overweight. I'm probably 10 pounds heavier now than I was then. But things like my hair was falling out and, just things from the stress. He said, so you need to change. And I was like, okay, I can do that. I've always been, I was always an exerciser. I, kind of watched what I ate. But when I asked him, what about lifestyle interventions? What about exercise? Why don't I have more severe symptoms? Is it because, I do exercise? Should I eat differently? And the answer was really discouraging. And he, immediately went to, we'd like to put you on methotrexate and, all of these other, pharmaceuticals. And he said, I really don't, and now I know better and why he said this. He said, I really don't, offer any of that lifestyle intervention, medical treatments, therapies. He said, I really, I focus on the medications that are going to help, ease the symptoms, that type of thing. So I did a little research and I was like, there's no way I'm going to take this drug. Just look it up. It has a lot of really scary side effects. And so I thought, well, I'm going to try to, maybe get through this by changing my lifestyle habits. So I decided I couldn't keep up this career. I needed to figure out something else. And I always had an interest in nutrition. So I went back to school. So I entered into a dietetics program. So I'm a registered diet tech, and then went on to get a master's. And the more I learned and the more I realized that, yes, not everything can be cured with diet and exercise. It has a lot, it gives you the energy to be able to do some other things that, these conditions prohibited me from doing before. So I know there's a combination of, medical interventions and lifestyle. So I got to the point where I was like, I think I need to, really change my career path. And so it was a 6-7 year progress, or progression. But I, started to do some health coaching and personal training on the side, and then eventually left my full-time job to launch my company. And now I focus on people like me, busy professionals who are on a path to burnout and all of that kind of stuff. So long way of saying that I came to this very much out of my own personal health struggle or crisis. And now I see it all the time. I mean, autoimmune conditions are just so prevalent, mostly in women. I mean, I think there was some statistic like 75% of women have one autoimmune condition. So lifestyle interventions can really help with that. It can help manage the symptoms. So it's something I'm really passionate about.
That's really interesting. And I would just say, you brought up a lot of things that we've talked about previously in terms of like where the root cause of a lot of problems, not enough sleep and high stress lifestyle. And we don't really think on a day-to-day basis how much that impacts us, because it's just little micro problems, and then it sort of grows and becomes bigger problems over time, right? So something that starts out as a little small problem becomes a big problem when it's left ignored and unattended to, right? So I guess for one of the things I'm thinking about is, so you met with your rheumatologist at the time, right? And they wanted to start medication, and they didn't necessarily, not that they were opposed to it, it's just that that's not their typical practice of how they treated that particular medicine. And you, knowing a little bit better, or for your own health and well-being, said, I want to really look into some lifestyle options. So I guess the real question is do you still see that rheumatologist now? Or did you seek the counsel of someone that, was more experienced in lifestyle? Or did you take this all into your own hands and made it happen yourself?
So I don't see this rheumatologist only because we moved. I was living in Raleigh, North Carolina at the time when I was diagnosed. I really credit, and I went back to the eye doctor who really figured it out. And I just, like, I was, I said to him, I said, I would cry if I could create tears, but I don't, like, my eyes are so dry, I don't have any tears. I said, but I'm so grateful that he could see that there was something underlying. After that, I really took it upon myself because I am a very type A person, professional. And so you tell me I can't do something, I will put my whole self into it to either prove you right or prove you wrong. So it's just one or the other. But I really did kind of dive into it on my own, and a lot of, missteps along the way, where I went into, I was going to do an elimination diet and, really, go to extremes. And then I, dialed it back. So it was, it was a combination of support from other physicians too, primarily my OBGYN. I will say that, for many women, that's kind of our primary care physician. And for a certain number of years, you see them every year. And when we moved back to Pittsburgh, I really started to talk to her about, just food and exercise as it related to midlife as well as these conditions. And she was very supportive of that. So it was kind of interesting. It was a mix of physicians that were supportive, but not necessarily the rheumatologist.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I guess, how are you doing now?
I'm actually doing really well. So I've been able to, I was diagnosed in 2014. So I've been able to keep the rheumatoid arthritis completely in remission. So there I get, regular x-rays on my wrists and, just to see if there are any kind of fractures or anything that's kind of going on, yearly blood blood work. I do take Plaquenil, which is hydroxychloroquine, which is now everybody knows about hydroxychloroquine. I do take that. So that was my initial rheumatologist compromise. I didn't want to take methotrexate. And he said, okay, well, we can, it's a lupus drug primarily, but he said, it has shown to be effective. I've since reduced that dosage in half. My rheumatologist here is supportive of lifestyle interventions to an extent. And I was getting better numbers every year and kind of holding steady. And Sjogren's syndrome, there are some eye complications with hydroxychloroquine. So, I was like, if I don't need it and I'm feeling okay, can we cut the dosage? So we cut the dosage in half, and really I've kind of maintained the status quo. So I don't know that I'll ever go off of it completely. I do think it provides a little bit of relief, but I'm probably healthier than I've ever been. I'm 50 years old, and I feel like since figuring out that, my lifestyle was, really a detriment to my health, it's only improved since then.
That's great to hear. Yeah, that's great to hear. Nick, do you have any questions in particular?
No, I just think your story is incredibly inspiring and kind of really just goes to show how holistic interventions kind of have this profound positive impact on your health.
Yeah, I mean, I think the other thing is, when you were talking about sleep and some of those things, the kind of the foundation, I call it the foundations of flourishing. When I work with people one-on-one, most people come in to my practice and say, I need to lose weight. I want to lose 20 pounds. And so once we kind of get to the whys and, the motivation behind it and, all the years of maybe yo-yo dieting and all that kind of stuff, we do not do any nutrition or fitness recommendations until that person gets the sleep under, typically they're, not getting enough sleep. So we work on sleep, stress, and hydration first. And people laugh at me and I said, just give me 2 weeks. We're going to work on this. We're going to have a sleep routine. We're going to talk about stress management and how you're dealing with chronic stress and, those types of things. And you're going to drink enough water every day. And in 2 weeks, people will come back for a follow-up appointment and say, I lost 5 pounds. And I'm like, yeah, because guess what? Your body is not in fight or flight mode. It's not holding on to everything because it's so stressed out and exhausted and dehydrated. So for our practice, we're very focused on those kind of basic foundational things that we need as humans. I mean, exercise and nutrition is very, very important, but if you don't have the energy to do it, if you're sleep deprived, if you're dehydrated, do you have the energy to really put in a good workout or, make a good meal? No, you're going to be craving sugar and, all those things because you're exhausted. So we're very focused on that kind of, lifestyle, behavior management, before we even talk about weight loss and calories and all that kind of stuff.
I love that because, I teach an exercise testing and prescription course here at Drexel, and Nick's been one of my students in the class. And one of the things that always astonishes me, what we try to do is, as opposed to making the class something that is, just find a friend or find, just come up with a hypothetical scenario. We have to design an exercise prescription. We actually have people go and find people that they either live with, that they know, that actually needs the help, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a form of service learning. And it's always funny because when we want, the first phase is the pre-participation screening and health history type stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and the goal setting. And a lot of times what we notice is like I have a student right now and she's working with her dad, and her dad came in to do the assessment, and we asked him about his goals, and he said, what's the common number that a lot of people want to lose? I want to lose 50 pounds. Right. And
Mm-hmm.
so what is it about 50 pounds? What is that number? Is that the number that like your doctor, is that the minimum threshold where your doctor starts to say, hey, you've lost a lot of weight? Is that the number where we're starting to see positive changes in things like metabolic profiles?
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of times I really see this as like an arbitrary number. And so we actually, as part of that class, we do a lot of the after the assessment piece, we figure out like, here's a healthy percentage of body fat. Here's where you're at now. And we do the math and figure out, hey, this is how much weight you actually need to lose, and so it's just kind of
Right.
funny how, like, a lot of times when folks start this journey, I think a lot of it comes down to whether it's issues with compulsive overeating or not
Mm-hmm.
exercising, or really just, being someone that has a shopping problem, right? That goes out and
Mm-hmm.
spends a lot of money and puts money on credit cards. That type of the root cause a lot of times only happens until you actually come to grips with, as you said, the why, like why people are
Mm-hmm.
really doing it. And until you measure it and track where you're at, you can't possibly design something that's going to help people for the future, because you don't
Right.
know if it's changing out of nowhere or if it's changing for a particular reason. So I like how you isolate your variables. If I may ask one question, just as a follow-up to
Yeah.
your statement, was you had brought up the foundations of flourishing, and so I
Yeah.
wanted to stop you right then and there, but you had a good flow going. So I had written sleep, stress, hydration. Is there any other foundations of flourishing that you practice as part of your business?
Yeah. So we go through those and they're in that order: sleep, stress, hydration, and then food and fitness. So, there is those are components, right? And it's, so something that struck a nerve with me that you just said was compulsive overeating. I work with mostly women, and it's
Mhm.
compulsive undereating. Women are eating 1,000 to 1,200 calories a day and have, nearly wrecked their metabolism because their bodies have not been well nourished. And so when they start to get sleep and when they start to manage stress, appetite comes back, or they're, well hydrated, they have the energy, so they start to exercise, and then they're hungry. And, I have had women in my office who have cried because I said they had to eat 1,800 calories. And I'm like, 1,000 calories is like for a toddler. Like my granddaughter, my 6-year-old granddaughter is probably eating more than 1,200 calories a day. Like, so there's this, we've become such a society of extremes, right? So, and there's, lots of research and information around obesity and, as a health condition. But, then there's the other side of the spectrum where people have just been restricting for so long that that's really difficult to kind of break out of those habits. And they'll come in and say to me, I'm just, I'm so tired. And I always get to, well, why do you want to change? Why is this important to you? And, how is this, whatever it is, losing weight, having more energy, how is that going to change your life? Like, how is that, what are you visualizing? So we do a lot of like goal setting and SMART goals, and looking at like, so at the end of this year, what's that vision of, Mike or Nick, what is that vision that you want to achieve? And then why? And then working back from that. And when you do it for people like that, it's like, because I work with a lot of professionals, they're like, oh, this makes sense. This is like my yearly development plan. Like this is, I get this, at work, I set goals for the year. And then every quarter I have milestones, or every, month I'm tracking, to your point, tracking and kind of staying on top of it. So it's great to see people kind of finally realize that, it is attainable, when they've got the right, goal, and then the foundations, and, really have a strong, compelling reason why they want to do it.
Yeah, I would imagine sometimes it could take quite a while to figure out the why, right? Because sometimes people can be very guarded, and not wanting to share the real reason why they want to change, right? And
Yeah.
so, one of the things that I've been playing around with this a lot in terms of is this idea of ordering, right? Like, we remember, elementary school, middle school, please put these in smallest to largest, right?
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, from your experience working with entrepreneurs, how there's different personality types, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so someone who's an entrepreneur has a very specific personality type,
Mm-hmm.
right? Right.
Yes.
And so when you're working with people that have different personality types and different strategies for how they approach their life, I'm just wondering, with I love the foundations. And I'm just wondering if the order of what you're prioritizing, like, for example, you would give the example of sleep, stress, and hydration first. 2 weeks for give me 2 weeks, and let's see what we can do with 2 weeks, right? Um, but do you always start with sleep? Or, if someone else is the root cause of the job, maybe we're gonna focus on starting with just hydrating more, and then so
Yeah.
is there a certain sweet science to the order of how you apply those principles from person to person?
Yeah. So entrepreneurs tend to, I can hedge my bets pretty well that sleep and stress are the first two things that they need to work on. They're stress probably more than anything, but it's that snowball kind of effect, right? Like I'm stressed, I don't sleep. I don't sleep, I'm more stressed. So, it's almost like chicken or the egg, what came first. But so no, so somebody comes in and I've had, a few clients, here and there that will come in and say, I'm actually pretty, like my sleep is pretty good. I get, 6, 7 hours, and I always talk, 7 to 9 hours is the goal. But if you're getting really quality sleep, if you're soundly asleep, easily falling asleep and coming out of it, easily, and you're at 6 hours, I'm okay with that, quality over quantity. So there's flexibility in the coaching that I do with some of those foundations, because sometimes people do come in and say, and I think we are now more aware of the importance of hydration. So sometimes that's an easy one. They're either used to doing it and got, fallen off the wagon a little bit, and they can get back on fairly quickly. But sleep and stress, I mean, consistently, time after time, client after client, are the two things. And whether which one comes first, it doesn't really matter in terms of the coaching, but they are typically some of the first things that we talk about. If somebody is truly doing all the right things, and just needs that tweak to their nutrition plan, or they've been working out a lot. I have a friend who, she's a runner, and she has lost on her own over 100 pounds. I mean, she's just a really super inspirational person. And there were some things that she got, down to those last few pounds. I mean, it's just her body was kind of at a plateau, and so how do you change up those things? But she was doing all the other things right. So there are cases where somebody just needs help with one or two areas, but most, especially entrepreneurs, it's it's the stress, and it doesn't matter really where they are. They could be struggling in their business and have stress, and they could be growing in their business and have stress. So it's really, it's good stress, it's bad stress, but it's all stress. Your body feels it, really, and reacts to it the same way. So we do kind of play around with the order, but it's really proven itself out over the past 5 years. Most people struggle with those three things.
Sure. Yeah, I think, just, going along my own journey of how things have happened, I've noticed that sleep was something that I've really prioritized more. I guess you can blame the pandemic, because you could work on, you could pretty much work whenever you want, and you're home, so you don't have the travel time, but a lot of areas where I hear, where I fear like pain points is, well, I have high, I have a family, I have a high stress lifestyle, I have demands from work, I don't have time to sleep, right? And I read this book by Matt Walker called Why We Sleep, and it kind of like really went through a lot of like, if you don't sleep, these are going to be the consequences, right? And so, like, this sort of connecting all the way back to some of the health conditions you brought up earlier is like, right, you can get by with one night of short sleep. You might even be able to get by 2 or 3. But if you perpetually do that over the course of your whole life, there's a reason why when you wake up in the morning, I always say it this way. If I don't sleep well and the alarm goes off, there's the first 3 words that enter in my mind are WTF, right?
Right.
Those are the first 3 things. I don't want to be getting up, right? I the first 3 things I say to myself. So really, thinking through, like, getting your sleep right seems to at least give you the opportunity to really get everything else right. Because if you're staying up too late and you're oversleeping. Now you don't have time to make a healthy breakfast to get your day started.
Right, right. It's just that snowball effect. And I think people really underestimate the importance of it and how good they feel. And I always say, like, think about how you feel when you come back from vacation, right? When you don't have to get up, or, that's what we're going for, right? We can't live in a perpetual vacation, but you want that feeling of, I'm well rested, I'm ready to take on whatever it is today. I can deal with stress. The lack of sleep, our fuses are short. And so when stressful moments come up, I can tell for myself, like if I just didn't have a good night's sleep, I'm not dealing with things as well. I'm not reacting, or I'm reacting in the wrong ways to things. So yeah, I mean, I tell people all the time, I said in fact, this morning, I got my hair done today, and my stylist said to me, okay, he said, what's the one thing that I should be doing? I said, you should be sleeping more. And he was like, how do you know I don't sleep? I said, it's a good guess. I said, because most people don't sleep. I said, but it is tied to longevity. It is tied to heart health. It is tied to, obesity and avoiding some of the complications of really major diseases. Sleep. I said, it's when your body recovers. You're standing on your feet all day. That is physically demanding. You need to recover at night. And he was like, wow. He's like, I thought you were going to tell me, you need to exercise this much, wait. And I said, but if you're not sleeping, you're not going to do that. So I wouldn't even start there.
Yeah. What would you say your approach is to, cause like I've, worked in business. I have some business degrees myself. And, sometimes like they're setting the expectation right when you're working with folks that have these lifestyles, right? In terms of like, do you ever notice that there's like a level of overconfidence, like, yeah, I can do it, no problem, and then managing expectations tends to be more good in theory but difficult in practice?
It is. So one is, it's a double-edged sword, because I love working with people who have confidence, right? And have self-efficacy that I can do this. I've achieved all of these other things in my personal and professional life. Of course I can do this. So that's great, because, I know that they're ready. They're at the stage where they're, ready to change. But then it is like reining them in, to say, you can't do, they'll say to me, I'm good. All right, stress, yeah, I got that. I'll meditate. Sleep, sure. 7 hours, sure, I'll do that. And they want to do everything at once. And so, it's because of their high achieving personalities. And so it's one, reining them in and saying, okay, I'm thrilled that you're so committed to this, because it's hard to get people to take it seriously and be committed. Here's the plan. So I typically do like a 12-week program. Here are the things. And I said, think of it as, you're coming into this like your first job, right? You don't know everything, and it's okay that you don't know everything. And when you kind of get through that, you break through that, I need to be the boss. I need to be the smartest person in the room. And when you can tell them it's okay that you don't know that you're here, it's okay that you don't know what to do. You can't. You're busy, conquering the world in these other ways. So let somebody who knows, let me be the expert. Let me be the person who supports you. And this has come from my speech writing days, right? You write a speech for an executive. A very vulnerable thing that they have to be very vulnerable and be okay with someone else writing words for them. And so I've just learned over the years, like it's a fine line between, giving them the support they know they need and, taking a shot at their ego, right? Because they still want to be that high performing, successful person. And so it's a very fine line. But I feel like by the time they get to me, most of the executives or the entrepreneurs that I'm working with, they're like, I can't do this. I can't figure it out. I've tried. They've typically done all of the other things. They've worked with a personal trainer at their gym, or they've, and realized that they need more support. So I still have those that want to do it all at once. And, so we try to take each week to add on, like let's start. And I always recommend the book Atomic Habits to my clients, because I'm like, it's about starting with one thing and mastery, and then let's stack another habit onto it. So you might go through those first 2 weeks and get those first 3 things like down, and then fine, that's great. But we're not going to do all 5 things from day one, because it's research says that it doesn't work. You're not going to sustain those habits. So it's a lot of I wish I would have taken more psychology classes. Let's just put it that way.
I was just going to ask you what kind of systems. I was going to ask you what kind of systems that you use with your clients to help them build this. But if you've read and recommended James Clear's Atomic Habits,
yeah,
then, your behavior is only going to be as good as your systems are created to facilitate that.
Right. And it's very much SMART goal. I don't care what other new fancy goals settings thing comes out. I'm like, to me, there's no better way to do that. So my system is fine. Let's set that vision for 12 months from now. What you give yourself a year to be this person that you visualize. And then I do quarterly. So another great book is called The 12-Week Year. And I'm not remembering the authors. There were 2 guys that were the authors, but they talk about treating every 12 weeks as its own year. So not as a quarter. So don't think of it that way, but think of it as actually a year. So what is your goal for that 12-week year? And then it's, adding those habits in. So, then we break it down into those 12-week sections throughout the year. And then monthly, what are you doing monthly? And it resonates with my clients because, again, a lot of them are very metric driven, right? I have a plan. I know the numbers I need to hit. They're salespeople or they're, executives. So they respond to that. So my approach has always been to take it, from that business angle. And the other thing is that also makes them feel more comfortable with me, because they know I've been in that world and I understand what they're dealing with. So they do let down a little bit of their guard. But we break it up into 12-week sections. We're not focusing on what you're doing in October, and we're not waiting until October to measure what you're doing, for your year-long goal. We're talking about it every week in our coaching session, monthly, quarterly, and, so on.
Yeah, that's really helpful. So you brought up how you relate to the clients as how you came from the business world. And so you put it in terms that they also understand. So I was intrigued when you said that your last job before you went into your own business was you worked for McDonald's, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess, one of the things that I'm always interested in is what made the Flourish Group a gap or a need that the world needed, that you said, you know what, I'm in this position at McDonald's. Maybe I'm satisfied. Maybe I'm not. Maybe it's okay. It's just okay. Maybe it was really well paying. And you said, you know what, I want to start my own business and do this. What was sort of the thing that made you sort of realize that? And then realizing is one thing, then having the guts to actually quit your job and do it is completely different. So can you talk a little about that?
Yeah. So when I was diagnosed in 2014, and I didn't leave McDonald's to almost 2016. But in that time, I started, still traveling a lot. 80% of the time I was, on an airplane in a hotel room. So I started to do, in my mind, probably the foundation. So I started to really put some parameters around. I'm not going to the bar after dinner. I'm going to bed. I'm going to, draw that line in the sand. And as I started to do that, I happened to be my executive at the time that I was writing for. She was a senior operations person at McDonald's. And she said to me one night, as I was like, good night, everyone, going to bed, she said, will you text me in the morning when you go to the gym? And I said, sure. I said, it's going to be early. We have to be, at our meeting at 7:30. So it might be like 5:30. That's okay. Text me. So I text her. And then it kind of caught on with, within the group that, I traveled with and the executive team. And Then it became a couple of other women who said, could you just let me know when you're doing this? Hey, you should start a Facebook group and we could all join there and keep each other accountable. And I was like, okay. So I started this face. So I was coaching before I had any business coaching or any credentials to be coaching. I'm starting my own journey and my own educational journey. I started school in 2016. So I was heading down that path. But one of the things that stood out to me and why I wanted to work with, as I started to realize I really love this, I really love working with people and helping them do small things, just, getting up a little earlier. As I started to do that, a lot of the executives, McDonald's had a period of time where they lost, this is before I was there, but they lost 2 senior executives in a very short period of time. And it was from preventable diseases. So one, had some heart condition, and then there was something else. I can't remember what the other one, but they both died. And so McDonald's put into place an executive wellness program. So they would send anybody who was at a VP level and above, the Cooper Clinic, I think it was, in Dallas, and they would spend 3 days there and come back with this big, thick binder. And so my boss at the time, this woman, she came back after being away for 3 days, which is so stressful for an executive, right? To be offline, not doing work, for 3 days. She came back, she slammed this binder on the desk, and she was like, this is all great. How am I going to do this? When am I going to do this? She's like, look at this. Tell me where I could, get 150 minutes a week of exercise when I'm on a plane every single day. And I was like, let's look at it. So I open it up, and here I'm like, this is not my job, but let's look at it and let's, see, like, where do you have to go to this meeting? Can somebody else go in your place, or can you delegate things? Can you, prioritize, getting up a little bit earlier, whatever it might be. So that's when I realized, and she looked at me and she's like, you're really good at this. And I was like, I don't know. It makes sense to me, that you're worth finding the time for all of this. And then I was saying to her, I'm like, let's just take one thing at a time. Let's just start with one thing. Go, come with me to the gym when we're traveling. So that's where it kind of started. And I realized that's the gap. That's what the world needs. The world needs, and it doesn't have to be a senior vice president at McDonald's. It's the small business owner who is, whose business now has survived COVID and all of the things that came with that. And they're super stressed out. They don't have enough staff, or they, their healthcare has, gone through the roof. Like, whatever those things are, it's the same level of stress. It's just different, different people. So that's the gap. And I knew if I could understand their world and understand their struggles and challenges, that there was a market for it.
Yeah, it sounds like it it has an interesting story, and and maybe one that you didn't necessarily expect, right?
No, not at
And you're
all.
like, hey, I'm pretty good at this. And then and so it's kind of interesting, because what you were providing for the executive, it sounded like she was giving back and providing you, like, sort of like the structure of, like, hey, you're really good at this. This is like this is a business, right? And so it's really interesting to see that. Now, were you trying to start the business sort of in your free time, or did you just say, you know what, if I really want to dedicate myself to this wholly, and then you just made the jump and said, hey, I'm grateful for everything I've had at McDonald's, but this is something that's really important to me, and I'm going to go and do this full time? You just sort of like, because a lot of people have anxiety, right? Like, the fear of missing out, or what happens if I fail, or they try to kind of like do it as their side hustle, and then eventually have it take over. So like, so for you, what was that story for you?
It was a little bit of that. So I knew I had to leave. That job was not getting any easier, and they kept going through restructuring. So every time I'd like survive a wave of layoffs, yay. But guess what? Now you have, a new division to support. So I knew that wasn't going to be the long-term play for me. But what I thought is, when I went back to school to get that dietetics degree, I thought I would move into the menu and nutrition department at McDonald's. I thought I was going to support, we had chefs and dietitians on staff. I thought that's where I would take my communications background, write for them, whatever. It had a lot less travel. And then that kind of all that other stuff was happening. And I realized now that's not what I want to do. I really want to coach and to help people. So I did leave McDonald's for another full-time job at a very large health system here in Pittsburgh, and knew that that wasn't what I wanted to do long-term either. So I took the leap from there in 2017 or 2018, and did some freelance communications work. So I didn't walk away from my previous career right away because it paid the bills. And, I had some experience in long-term, contacts that knew they could give me writing work and things like that. And it would, they wouldn't have to worry about the quality. So I still did some communications consulting, but I left in 2018 and basically said, I'm going to do my own thing, even if it's a hybrid of types of work. And then launched the Flourish Group in 2019. So it'll be 4 years this June, I think, like officially. So yeah, and I opened up office space 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago, after kind of the initial lockdowns of COVID. I couldn't take working from home. I'm an extrovert. I like to be out and around people, even if I don't know who they are. So I went into a shared office space, like a co-working space, to be able to have a more formal presence for, I do body, composition scans, things like that. So, a home office wasn't really going to cut it.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. And it's also good to have the physical boundaries and a reason to leave the house every once in a while, right? Especially during the pandemic where no one was able to really do that. Well, this has been terrific so far. I mean, we've talked a lot about your wellness services and some of your work with people, but I understand that the other arm of your services is really you do some work with the communication side, right? So you still keep your marketing expertise going along. So you could talk a little bit about sort of how that works and what kind of work you're involved with.
Yeah. So, and what's been great about it, is that it has evolved into more wellness communication. So I've been able to be a little bit more selective. When I first left my full-time job, I was working for our local power company, so that had nothing to do with wellness. I was writing for their executives and their communications team. But what came of that, and this is how I look at everything, is every year for their all-employee meetings, they bring all of their line workers and office and executive teams together for an annual meeting. And for 3 years, we've provided wellness breaks for those meetings. So initially, it was done virtually because it was in the middle of COVID. And so I had done recorded videos, and it just it became a thing that they really enjoyed. They put it on their intranet afterwards for employees. And then I developed guidebooks to go with those topics. So the first year I did videos on sleep, stress, and hydration. And so they still have those. They said they put them on their wellness section of their website, along with the guidebooks that we developed. So I do a lot of that, which I love because I'm a writer at heart. I love to put that into play. I've done some work for nutrition companies that have products that just need a qualified credentialed author for, a blog post or, things like that. But somebody who also, because it's, somebody who's credentialed is not necessarily the best writer, and, vice versa. So I've been able to kind of, take my experience and my new credentials, or new-ish, and do those types of things. I write for a fitness website. I do, blog posts for them. Although that's been a while, but so I still do a little bit. I have a one contract that is not related to wellness at all. And it's a friend of mine, and she's like, please don't leave. I just need like a few hours a month of your time. So, and that's great. It's like I said, it's always nice to have some consistent work, but for the most part, it's a lot of the blog posts, newsletter articles. I have we have our own workplace wellness services. So I work for a local McDonald's franchisee. She does a wellness program for her manager. She has 8 restaurants. And so we do a monthly, it's all online. So tons of communication and writing work that goes into that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, I have a quick question. So if I'm a prospective client, like where can I start? What can I do? How do I reach out? All that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so on my website, there's a place for people to reach out. It's really, I used to put on there all the different packages and services, and then I find everyone's a little different. And so while I do, 12-week programs, some people might only need, like a 4 to 6 week kind of jumpstart where they just need to get back on track and they've had, good established habits. But yeah, through my website, there's a contact us link that will come directly to myself and my operations manager. And then, I usually set up everybody who contacts us gets a free consultation. So, I always like to talk to people before they sign up for something, just so that expectations and fits and, they feel comfortable.
Great. That's awesome. What have you seen in your personal experience to be one of the most difficult kind of external factors that kind of inhibit sort of these changes?
So, in the last 3 years, I think it's been a lot of the isolation. So I feel like, when people don't have community, so whether that's in the gym or even meeting, a friend for a workout, a class, that, I think you could have gone one of 2 ways during COVID. I know somebody who lost a lot of weight and got in great shape because they had the extra time. And then a lot of people who did not like being at home, really, their mental health suffered to the point where, they physically weren't motivated to do things. So I would say in the last 3 years, isolation has been a barrier for a lot of people and kind of getting back into it. Right now, hybrid work is great, but it's also a balancing act. And so I'm getting a lot of requests for workshops on work-life balance, but we're not calling it work-life balance anymore. It's work-life integration, because there's no balance. You're never going to have it, 50-50 split of personal and professional. So I think it's this new way of working. It's really great. And some people love the idea of the flexibility to be home, but how do you manage all of those things? So it's, it's time, it's prioritization, those types of things that are always the roadblocks. It's not usually a desire to change, because once somebody has, said they want to change, they really do, but they don't know how to get through those common barriers.
Yeah, definitely. So if I were to be a part of the Flourish Group and participate, would I get that sense of community to help me kind of initiate some of these changes?
Yeah. So initially for, a few years, we were doing Facebook groups. But as more and more of my clients were, I was finding and connecting with them on LinkedIn. I created a community there. And so that's where, in addition to, maybe coaching, or you're on my email list or something like that, and you're getting information, we have, this kind of connection on LinkedIn. And because it's all professionals, it's people who are going through the same things that, somebody else is going through. And so that's been really great. We're looking right now for, my lease is up in August. And so I'm actually looking for space, almost a kind of retail location where I can do in-person workshops, or we can do more community-based education, bringing in different speakers, some small group health coaching and personal training. So we're getting there. But for now, the community is really, kind of has been online, at least for the last several years.
Great.
Yeah, it's really grown a lot. I just pulled it up on my other screen here. It looks your LinkedIn group alone has over 4,300 followers since, and your whole company's only been open for 4 years. So that's
well, but you have to remember, this is a second career. It's networks that, and
that's great.
it's great. I wish I would have, part of me wishes I would have found this career 20 years ago, but I don't think I would have been as successful as quickly because, you don't have those networks and you don't have those connections in your 20s and 30s necessarily. It comes with age. So I guess there's a good thing about getting older.
Well, you've done a really good job, and the future definitely seems very bright for both you yourself, Niki, and your team and the Flourish Group at large. I guess, with the last couple minutes that we have, is there any last minute things that you think, any messaging that a lot of our audience members are not only students who might be not sleeping, having a lot of stress, faculty members, right, advisors, people within the community, people within athletics might be watching this, people within ACSM might be watching this. So I guess just any last minute words that you have that you like to impart as part of your messaging, and then lastly, where could people find you?
Yeah. So I go back to the basics, and I find sometimes because I get a lot of, I do internships through Slippery Rock University with the exercise science program there. And they're students, they're college students, they're young people. So, I always say, get these basics in place now. Do this in your 20s. Be the person who goes to bed at a reasonable time because when you're in your 40s, this is all going to, it's all going to catch up to you. So for students, focus on the basics, try to eat as well as you can, to get that sleep, to find ways to manage stress. They have so much more stress on them than we did. Me, in the late 80s, early 90s when I was in college, and thank God there was no social media anywhere to, I'm glad there were, not a lot of cameras at things. But I just say, focus on the basics now and don't let that, especially students in health and fitness, careers, the influencers and the people out there who are telling you need to look a certain way or try this crazy workout or, lean on your education, go back to the basics, sleep, getting enough water, moving your body, that type of thing. And then I would just say, for those who are older and those who are more sedentary, get up and move. It doesn't have to be a lot. I'm working with a manufacturer right now in Florida, and we're talking about a challenge for the next month is to add 10 minutes of movement a day. So it doesn't have to be a lot. It's getting up, it's moving around, it's not sitting in your office, your cube, at your desk all day long. It really is good for your mental health and your physical health. So just really the basic stuff. And then you can find me, like you said, theflourishgroup.net is my website. I'm Coach Niki on LinkedIn. That's probably the best place to follow me. I'm also on Instagram, but I'm not one of those like fitness influencers. You're not going to see me doing any upside down crazy exercise moves or anything like that. But it's Niki Campbell _ the Flourish Group and the Flourish Group on Facebook. So it's, very easy to find me and get in touch. But yeah, I love to connect with and speak with any kind of group, especially if we can catch young people and get them to establish those habits early on.
Absolutely. Well said. Well, this has been incredible. Thank you so much for taking the time to meet with Nick and myself and our audience members here today. Folks, Nick will have all that posted in the in the YouTube notes. So we'll have all of Niki's contact information, her website, so you can find her. And once again, it's been really an honor and a privilege to speak with you today. So thanks for doing that,
appreciate
everybody.
it.
And make sure that you are following I counted 1, 2, 3, 4, the 5 pillars, 5 for the foundations of flourishing: sleep, stress, hydration, food, and fitness. So make sure that you do that, folks, and we'll see you all next time. Take care, everybody.